Welcome to Expand Your Empire, the podcast where women stop deferring wealth and start building financial power. I'm Amanda Taylor, investor, strategist, and disruptor of outdated money rules. It's time to own your worth, grow your assets, and build a legacy that lasts.
So this episode is not for the woman who doesn't know what she's doing wrong. This episode is for the woman who knows exactly what she's doing wrong. She could probably teach a masterclass on it, and she's doing it anyway. She's read the books, she's done the programs, she can articulate her money blocks with impressive clinical precision. She knows she's underpricing, she knows she's avoiding her numbers, even knows that she's waiting for this feeling of readiness that's never going to arrive on its own. She knows all of this. She has known it for a while, and she's still right there. If that is you, stay with me, because today we're not adding to your knowledge. We're going somewhere underneath it. So here's the thing that most money mindset content gets wrong. It assumes that the problem is the awareness. If we just name the pattern clearly enough, you'll go fix it. And for about 48 hours after you listen to an episode like that, maybe you do. You raise one price, you open your bookkeeping software, you feel inspired, then 2 weeks later, you're back to exactly where you were, except now you have a slightly more sophisticated language for why you're stuck. You see, the awareness didn't fix it because awareness was never the actual problem. So here's what I've come to understand after working with women in business and after literally being the woman I'm describing for longer than I want to admit. The pattern isn't your strategy. It is not in your pricing model or your financial literacy or your marketing funnel. The pattern is in your identity, specifically that gap between who you intellectually know you are capable of being and who you actually experience yourself as being on a Tuesday morning when a client pushes back on your rate. Those are two very different women. And your brain knows it, and it's working very hard to protect the one who's already familiar, because familiar feels safe even when familiar is keeping you broke. Now, here's the part that I find almost funny in retrospect when I look at my own history with this. The smarter you are, the better you are at this particular trap, because smart women don't just hit the identity ceiling and stop. Smart women intellectualize their way around it. We research it, we analyze it, we build extremely coherent frameworks for understanding why we're doing the thing that we're doing. And that understanding, it feels like progress. And in the meantime, we're still doing the same thing. I know this because I am wired this way. I am someone who leads with logic. My natural move when I'm uncomfortable is to go get more information, more data, more detail, or more clarity, because if I can just understand it precisely enough, then I'll be ready to move. What I've had to learn the hard way is that facts can just be a defense. Research can be a delay. Trying to understand can just become a very sophisticated substitute for actually experiencing anything. You can think your way into a concept. You cannot think your way into an identity. And the shift from, I know I should charge more, to I am someone who charges what I'm worth, it's not an intellectual shift. It does not happen in your head. It happens through experience, through the discomfort of actually doing the thing before you feel ready and surviving it, and then doing it again until your nervous system finally updates its records on where you are, which means all the knowledge in the world is preparation. And preparation that never converts to action is just very informed way of staying stuck. So today I want to go through 5 signs you're playing small with money, but we're not going to go through them so you can know them. We're going through them so you can recognize yourself, not just intellectually, but in your body, in the specific situations where you're currently using your very capable mind to avoid the thing you say you want. Notice where the logic feels airtight. That is where identity lives. So the first sign is underpricing. And before you say, yes, I know I need to raise my prices, I want to slow down because I'm not interested in whether you know it. I'm interested in the argument that your brain makes for why you haven't done it. Because here's the thing about underpricing. It almost always comes with a completely logical justification. And that's what makes it so sticky for smart women. The justifications sound like, oh, the market cannot support these higher rates. So have you tested that, or are you just deciding for them? Or I'm not established enough yet. Established how? By whose measure? By when? I will raise my prices once I have a bigger following or better testimonials or more confidence. So confidence is a prerequisite for action. Interesting. We'll come back to that. Or I don't want to put people out. I want to be accessible. So that is noble. Also, you cannot serve anyone from burnout, and you cannot build anything from a margin that doesn't work. Every single one of these is a reasonable sounding argument, and every single one of them is also the intellectual version of I don't believe I am worth more than this yet. That's the identity piece. Underneath the market analysis and the competitive research and the IMB strategic framing, there's a woman who's not yet made the internal decision that she is worth the number that maybe makes her stomach flip. And because that internal decision hasn't been made, the brain very helpfully generates external reasons why the timing isn't right. So here's what I've noticed in myself and in almost every woman I've worked with. The pricing conversation is never really about the market. It's about what you're willing to claim on your own behalf. And claiming something for yourself, especially a big number, especially before you feel like you've fully earned it. It feels presumptuous. It feels like you're making a statement about yourself and for women who are wired for logic, being challenged on something that we've claimed feels worse than just not claiming it in the first place. So we don't. We intellectualize it instead. We research pricing, we survey our competitors, we think about it very carefully, and we land on a number that doesn't scare us, which is also a number that doesn't build anything. So what the experience, what that shift looks like, the intellectual move is to analyze your pricing and decide and logically what is appropriate. The experience move is to name the number that makes you feel something, the one maybe your nervous system resists, and charge it to one person. Not in theory, to an actual human being who is considering hiring you. So what happens in that moment, that discomfort or resistance or urge to immediately discount or justify, that is information about your identity that no amount of research can give you. And when they say yes and you survive it and you do it again, that is when the identity starts to shift. It's not before. So the second sign is this financial avoidance, meaning not even paying attention, not opening the accounts, not reviewing numbers, not having a clear real-time picture of where you actually stand. And again, I am less interested in whether you know you are doing it. I'm interested in the logic, because avoidance usually doesn't look like I'm scared. It looks like prioritization. It looks like I've been so busy with client work. I have a bookkeeper, that's their job. I'll do a proper review at the end of the quarter. Or I don't want to make reactive decisions on daily numbers. These are all very reasonable things. They also function as a system for maintaining deliberate distance from information that might require you to feel something uncomfortable. That is avoidance with some strategic rationale attached. And here's what makes avoidance particularly interesting for the logical woman. The brain hates uncertainty more than it hates bad news. Studies on this are pretty clear. People often prefer knowing a negative outcome to sitting in the uncertainty of not knowing. Except that's not how we behave with money. We choose the uncertainty. We choose the not knowing. And the reason we do this is because the not knowing feels like it preserves our options. If I haven't looked, the number could still be okay. And once I look, I'm going to have to deal with whatever's actually there. But here's the thing, your logical brain already knows and is somehow not applying here. The number is what it is regardless of whether you look at it or not. The reality exists independent of your awareness of it. The only thing avoidance actually accomplishes is removing your ability to act on real information. So I sat with a woman, sharp, successful, running a multiple six-figure business, who hadn't looked at her profit and loss statement in almost a year. She was convinced she was in trouble. And it wasn't even based on data, it was based on a feeling. And because she wouldn't look, she couldn't challenge the feeling. She was making these really conservative decisions, turning down investments, staying small, all based on a story that her brain had written to fill in the information gap she had deliberately maintained. When we finally cleaned everything up, looked at it together, she was profitable and comfortably. But she had spent a year operating from a manufactured crisis because looking felt more dangerous than not knowing. And that is what avoidance actually costs, not just the number you missed, the decisions you made from a distorted picture. So the experience shift looks like this, that when you're intellectual, your move is to understand why you avoid the fear, the shame, the protection mechanism. It's all very interesting, but it doesn't open the account. The experience move is opening the account, not when you're ready, not when you have a full hour blocked and plan for what to do after. Now, or as close to now as possible, just look at it, just see, because the first look, the one where your heart rate goes up and you have to breathe through the urge to close the tab, that is the experience. That begins to rewire the relationship. Second look is easier, and the third easier still. You're not going to think your way into being comfortable with your numbers. You're going to look at them repeatedly until your nervous system stops treating them as a threat. Now, number 3, this is one I have to talk about carefully because the logic here is the most airtight of all 5, and we have to keep the logic. But this is where the intellectual bypass really earns its keep. Waiting for safety sounds like wisdom. It sounds like due diligence. It sounds like I'm not being reckless. And women, particularly women who have had to be careful, who've had to be responsible, who've had to make things work without a safety net, they have very legitimate historical reasons for not moving until they are sure. The problem is that sure, in the context of growth, is not a real destination. You will never have enough information to guarantee an outcome. You will never feel ready in advance of doing something new. Readiness is retrospective, meaning you feel ready after you've done the thing, not before. And the version of you that needs to exist on the other side of that leap you're not taking cannot be built from where you're currently standing. So here's the logic trap I catch myself in, and I'm betting you recognize it too. I need more information before I can decide. So I gather more information, and the new information raises new questions. So I need more information to answer those. And the questions get more refined and more specific and more sophisticated, and I actually get further and further from actually moving, while feeling increasingly like I'm making progress, because look at how much that I now understand about the situation. That is the shadow that lives in me most naturally, the one where I go get more facts, more details, more data, because if I can just get the picture complete enough, the right move will become obvious, and I can act without the discomfort of uncertainty. Except the picture is never complete. There is always another variable, and at some point, the research isn't preparation anymore. It's a very productive feeling way to stay in the same place. So Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys calls this the shadow of intellect. The way that pure rational analysis keeps us locked in this gap between here and there, endlessly calculating the distance instead of crossing it. Facts become the defense, not against being wrong, but against having to feel the discomfort of being in motion without knowing where you'll land. And that is where the identity piece comes back, because the real question underneath, am I ready, is always, am I the kind of person who does this? And if your current identity says no, if the woman you experience yourself as being doesn't do things like that yet, then no amount of preparation is going to make you feel ready. Because the readiness that you are waiting for isn't about information, it is about identity. And identities, they don't update in advance, they update through experience. So what that experience shift looks like, there is one question that cuts through the preparation loop better than anything I've found. What is the smallest version of this action I could take today? Not the full leap, the smallest possible move that is actually still a move. Send the email, say the price out loud to someone, book the call, sign up, start. The point is not that small moves build momentum, though they do. The point is that small moves create data that your brain didn't have before. And data from experience is the only thing that actually updates an identity. Your nervous system doesn't learn from research. It learns from what happens when you do the thing. Now, inconsistent income is the sign that masquerades most convincingly as a business problem because it has metrics. It has launch data and conversion rates and audience analytics. You can build a spreadsheet about it. I love to. You can have every intelligent conversation about it. It feels like the most solvable, most strategic, most logical of these 5 signs, which is exactly why it persists. Here's what inconsistent income usually looks like from the inside. You are creative. You have ideas. You try things. Some of them work for a minute and then they don't, so you try something else. You're not lazy. You're doing a lot, but the income doesn't stabilize. And the response to that instability is to then generate more ideas, because more options feels like a solution to the problem of not having found the right one yet. Except the problem is almost never that you haven't found the right offer. The problem is that you haven't stayed with any offer long enough for it to do what it needs to do, which is compound. Here is the logic trap. If this offer were right for me, it would be working better by now. So you conclude the offer isn't right and you go find a better one, except better keeps moving. Because the moment the new thing encounters friction, and it will, everything does, that same logic applies. If this were right, it would be working, and off you go again. I've done it. But what looks like strategic pivoting is often identity avoidance. Because staying with one thing means you'll eventually have to face why it isn't working. And that requires looking honestly at your sales process, your positioning, your follow-up, the uncomfortable, unglamorous work of actually making a thing succeed rather than just launching it. Starting over is easier. Starting over also looks from the outside like hustle. It is very easy to be extremely busy, going nowhere. The revenue architecture problem is real. Most women in business generally do not have a clear picture of what consistent income actually requires in terms of volume, price point, and your conversion rate. But more information about that revenue architecture is not what's missing. What is missing is the willingness to commit to one thing long enough to find out whether you can make it work, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it is slow, even when a better idea shows up and beckons. So for 90 days, not forever, just 90 days, you commit to one primary offer. You promote it with what will feel like embarrassing repetition. You stay with it when it's slow. You get curious about why it's slow instead of replacing it. You learn something real about sales and positioning and follow through that you can't learn any other way. That 90 days of discomfort is worth more than any strategy session, because the information you get from actually selling one thing consistently over time is experiential. It lives in you. It changes how you operate going forward in a way that no amount of strategy can replicate. Here we are with the fifth sign, which is the one I want to spend the most time on because it is where the identity piece is the most naked, even though it's also the most disguised. And this is putting yourself last financially, not paying yourself or paying yourself whatever's left or paying yourself inconsistently based on how the month went, which means you are perpetually dependent of your own business rather than its owner. Now, the logic for this one is the most virtuous sounding of all. I am investing in the business. My team has to be paid. I'll pay myself more once revenue is more stable. Or I don't need much, I'm fine. Or I'm building something and that requires sacrifice. All of this is sophisticated language for one very simple underlying belief. My needs are conditional. I have to earn my own compensation. I come after everything else. And what makes this an identity problem rather than a cash flow problem is this. If you restructured your business so that paying yourself first was non-negotiable, if the owner's drawer, owner pay came out of the first of every month before anything else, you would make different decisions across the board. You would price differently. You would take on clients differently. You would spend differently. The entire business would then calibrate around a different assumption about whose needs matter. That is not a math problem. That is a self-worth problem that the math is being used to justify. So here's what I have observed. Women who don't pay themselves will almost always find a way to avoid everything the business needs. New software, found it. Team member, figured it out. Marketing spend, made it work. The money materializes for the business because those feel like real needs. Their own compensation feels optional, like a bonus they haven't yet earned. And every month that passes reinforces the same identity. I am someone who takes care of everything else first. I am someone whose needs wait. I am someone who doesn't require much. And then we wonder why it's hard to hold a price, a rate. We wonder why it's hard to let a misaligned client go no matter how much they bug us. We wonder why we keep shrinking in rooms where we should be taking up space. And the answer is that we've been practicing in the most concrete financial terms possible the belief that we don't come first. So this shift, what we need to do is to pick a number, not the number you want eventually, the number that is real right now, even if it's uncomfortable. And set up an automatic transfer the first of the month before anything else, that money moves to you. But what comes next is important because you will feel the constraint. Cash flow will feel tighter. You will be tempted to skip it just this month. But the constraint is the point. The constraint will force you to make the decisions on your pricing, on your clients, on your expenses, those decisions that you've been avoiding because the current system lets you absorb the cost of those avoidances personally. Paying yourself first is not a reward. It is a forcing function. It is the most structurally honest thing you can do for your business because it requires the business to actually work rather than letting you silently subsidize its dysfunction with your own compensation. So let me bring this home. We've talked about 5 signs, 5 patterns, 5 completely different looking problems with completely different strategic solutions, except they're not actually different. Underpricing says I'm not yet enough to claim that rate. Avoidance says I'm not ready to face what's there. Waiting for safety says I'm not certain enough to move. Inconsistent income is I haven't yet found the thing that will finally work. And putting yourself last is I'm not yet deserving enough to come first. Not yet. That is the operating system. That is what's actually running underneath all of the strategy and the research and the very logical reasons. Some version of I am not yet the woman who has this. And because you're not yet her, you're preparing to become her indefinitely with great thoroughness. So here's the thing I most want you to hear, and I mean this with everything I've got. You cannot think your way into a new identity. You can understand it perfectly. You can map it, analyze it, name every component of it. You can listen to podcasts about it. You can know intellectually with complete clarity exactly who you need to become and exactly what's in the way, and still be standing in the same place a year from now. The shift happens in experience. It happens in the moment. When you say the price and don't walk it back, when you open the account and you look at the number without closing the tab, when you take the step before you feel ready and discover, oh shit, I survived. I'm still here. And now I know something I didn't before, not because I read it, but because I lived it. That is how identities change, not through understanding, through experience accumulated in the direction of who you are becoming. The woman you are trying to think your way into being, she is not waiting for you to figure it out. She's waiting for you to do something. The gap between knowing and being is not a thinking gap, and it is an action gap, and we have to figure out how to close it. So that's what I've got for us today. If it hit differently than the content you're used to, if it named something that awareness alone hasn't fixed, then I want to know about it. Come find me and tell me where you recognized yourself. And if you have been preparing to make a move, let this be the thing that ends the preparation phase. See you next week. Until next time, keep building.
If this lit something up, share it, review it, and get in the room. Join the Expand Your Empire community and start turning wisdom into wealth. You're not too late, and you're not doing this alone.